We're here.
How's your day been?
It's been a whirlwind. But
We've had some good technical challenges. We've had some good causes that we've been supporting. So welcome. We're at Your Brand Voice. I'm with Bryan Bruce, and we're going to have another conversation in the loop.
In the loop.
And I love these. We've done it, I think, 3 times, and just talking about stuff going on in the city. And I think we'd be wrong not to, at the outset, just say condolences to the family of Charlie Kirk and Erica and the kids. I mean, what a devastating news, gruesome videos that I saw. I just got nauseous. You know, that should never happen to any human being, and particularly somebody that stood for free speech. And, you know, he had conversations with people. Obviously, there's no comparison with what we're doing here, but look, you got to be able to sit down with people and have a conversation with them. He was a champion of First Amendment, and so I just, at the outset, want to send our well wishes to Erica and the family.
And how powerful and how strong is his wife. I mean, to be able to just get off the ground after something like that, and she's out there just leading the charge, and then even forgiving the killer, and it just, to me, it was very powerful. And
I think she may have been the only person in the room that forgave that guy. I mean, and more power to her, because it's you know, it takes a lot of courage to say something like that.
Especially so close to something happening. I
right.
can see maybe down the road, but like
right.
very short time after the tragedy.
There's going to be justice. I mean, Utah's going for the death penalty. Forgiveness and justice can go hand in hand, but it was a very powerful testimony that she had, an example of, you know, where I think there's some folks who would have a hard time forgiving a lot less than that, and I think we can all learn from that. And I think she was clearly the most inspirational person out of the whole memorial service, hearing from her. And a lot of great speeches, a lot of good testimonies of the guy's life. So again, in memory of Charlie Kirk, we're going to have a conversation about, you know, something, just a range of topics, because, you know, at the end of the day, people getting together and talking about issues is what matters. And, you know, I loved how, I think it was Van Jones on CNN said that, like, the day before, they'd been in some kind of argument online, and Charlie Kirk sent him a message and invited him on the show and said, "Hey, let's disagree agreeably," and that's just a great phrase.
He says, "I'll be respectful, and I know you will be too, but let's do it." And that's what you've been about with this. It was your idea to let's have a conversation, and even if we disagree, at least we can do it amicably. We can share each other's viewpoints, and we can move on whichever direction we go. But this is healthy, and
well, in the loop. That's it's about a longer conversation, probably not as many fireworks as Charlie sometimes got in his, but he was the best. He was the champ of that, and so that's kind of in his spirit. We're going to dive into some topics. I mean, so we don't plan any of this, you know, other than me texting you some topics beforehand and saying, "Hey, it's kind of what I want to talk about," and then we just come in and start talking about it. You know, as I think about some of the issues, you know, we had. Talk a little bit about the budget was passed last night, and then looking at some of the recent events where you had the Tuscawilla Tax meeting that happened, and you know these are things that do affect the residents of Winter Spring. So tell me, you were at the meeting last night. Usually, if I don't go to the meetings, I watch the videos afterwards. Did not have a chance to do that yet. So what am I in for when I kind of watch the budget? When your eyes are getting big, like. With some fireworks that went down, or what was going on?
You know, it was everybody that I shared with that I was going to the meeting said, "Oh, it should be a quick meeting." You know,
right?
The work is done.
It's only like two or three items.
Yeah, 2 or 3 items. We're just going to vote to approve the budget and move on. And I was kind of like, really? I mean, I thought this would be a time where there'd be some questions about some of the spending, some of the the things, but apparently that was not the way. The group wanted it to go down. They wanted to just rubber stamp the budget and move on. And my wife Victoria is still learning, the rules of engagement on that dais, and maybe she foolishly thought that was a time last night to talk about some of the spending that she thought was maybe a one.
They didn't want I'm misunderstanding you maybe.
Yeah, they didn't want to talk about some of the details of the budget. The expectation was that we would, it was a second reading.
Okay.
So the second reading is meant to be just a formality. And it'll just be, just like, this is not the time. And that was the impression I got.
Well, then what was the first reading?
Good question. But my point was, why are you voting if it's a,
So did they allow discussion on the budget?
Well, luckily, they moved quickly to make a motion to approve.
Okay.
They got a first and a second real quick.
Okay.
And Victoria's like, wait a second, I still have some things to say.
Which is fine. Then you open up for discussion.
And they paused.
Okay.
And they let her speak.
Okay.
And during that time, she pointed out, I think that we added up, it was between $500 and $1 million in spending that she thought maybe necessary, but not like important right this minute.
Okay.
Like
wish list kind of
wish
stuff.
list
Yeah,
versus necessities, and she just wanted to have that conversation. And
what were some of those things that she talked about?
New lawnmowers, new vehicles, a lacrosse wall. And her point on the lacrosse wall was, we've got volleyball pits that are not being maintained, but we're going to build another amenity that we may or may not maintain in the future. So let's maintain what we have before we build new, was her kind of the point she wanted to get out there. But just a bunch of stuff. There was a lot of renovations to maybe the city hall. Just some things that she thought were not critically necessary in a time where residents are getting hit with expenses here and there, and with their own utility bills and in the taxes, and then if you live in Tuscawilla, the TLBD, and just everything. She just wanted to break it down a little bit, but clearly the others thought that this was not the time to do that. They thought that she should have spent those times, weeks leading up to this meeting, to have already had those discussions with staff. But even if she did have that time, which could be debated whether it was made available to her as much as she would have liked.
Well, you got to be careful with that, because we've heard that you shouldn't meddle with staff, you shouldn't interfere with that. When are you going to talk about these things? If not during where you should. This is a public meeting. The public is there, and
what's the time to talk about it in the open, right?
Right.
Everybody's talking about sunshine. This is the sunshine, and I have been to all these meetings, and I have not seen any real discussion on the line items in that budget.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I've been watching every meeting. There's never been a discussion.
So this was starting to be that,
okay.
right? And
so she was bringing up specific
line items. She went through and she listed off maybe 10 or 15 in her mind that.
Not bad things, but
is it necessary right now?
It's priority. A question of priority.
An example was, there was a renovation to the code enforcement area of City Hall, and when she asked Tara Lynn about it, she said she didn't even know about it. So it was a carryover from a request a long time ago.
So for the viewers, who's Tara Lynn?
She does the permitting in the building department.
Okay.
And she's building up her team because
she might not be that engaged with that from a budget standpoint.
No, but she didn't ask for it. It was a carryover from before her time.
Got it.
And so if the department that's actually doing the work isn't really concerned about
that's an example of hey, this may be a great thing, but
staff's not even asking for it.
They're not asking for it.
Is it necessary? Is it necessary now? That was really the point.
Okay.
And so
she's right to ask those questions. It's hard for me to believe that somebody would object to her asking those questions.
So to that point, they had already had a first and a second.
Right. Now you're in discussion.
Victoria's like, before we vote, can I talk? Yes. They let her talk, and then Victoria's like, well, why don't we run the vote? And if it passes, then we move on. If it doesn't, then we can break this down and talk about it more. And that's what happened. They did the vote. And it was 3-2 against the budget. Victoria voted no, Diaz voted no, and Caruso voted no.
Okay.
And so that threw the mayor for a loop, because he wanted it just to be over and done with. And so did Sarah, and so did Kate. It appeared.
Well, I can't speak to Sarah and Kate, but the mayor is known to kind of try to shut things down and move.
Let's just wrap this up.
Right.
And so when it went 3-2. To no budget approval at this point, Victoria was able to kind of dive in, and when she dove in...
So they voted down the budget, or they voted...
Not to approve it, and it's on that second reading, as it stood at that point.
Okay.
So she started to go through her line items, and then Cade introduced another motion, which was again seconded by Sarah, and then when they did the vote, Mark Caruso voted yes, and it was 3-2 to approve.
Okay. So the budget was approved.
Budget was approved.
What would have happened if it had not been approved? Would we have no budget?
Well, that's the thing that Mayor made clear was that nobody's leaving this room until the budget is approved.
Well, it's not his choice.
It's what he said. He said it a number of times.
He just made a decree?
Well, he said it was against the law for us to leave, I think he said. He said it's against the law for us to leave without this approved. We need to approve it. It needs to go to Tallahassee. And that just led to...
There is a deadline, right?
I think there is, and I think it's coming up quick. And,
okay.
And so I think that was another issue, is the timing of this meeting that doesn't give a lot of discussion because your back's against the wall to get this approved, whether you're from the city or the staff standpoint.
Right, it's the classic, let's just wait till the night before so that we have to approve something to start talking about it so that we have to approve it versus why was this the first discussion about the budget? I mean, if we are against some statutory deadline, and it's just coming up last night, which is also, by the way, Jewish New Year, and so a lot of people couldn't be there because of that.
It was a very light room.
Yeah.
For that reason, and probably because they thought it was just going to be rubber stamped and there was really nothing to see here. But she wanted to talk. She wanted to bring up some of these issues. She wanted to have a discussion. And when she started to get into some of the nitty gritty and ask questions, she was told, and the staff said at the meeting, we're not prepared. We don't have that information. And she was like, well, isn't this the place to ask those questions? And everybody
what information was she asking for?
Just like just drilling down on some of these line items. Like, what is this for? What is this for? What is that for? And why is it necessary? And there was one, the lawnmowers they had an answer for. And Mark, being a landscaper, said, oh, that's the fair price for that. And I think that was enough for him to say yes on the whole thing.
Okay.
And that kind of...
So he had some specific objections that were answered.
Yeah, he let her speak, and then he got some of the things that he needed to hear.
It's a deliberative process. I just, as you're kind of recounting it to me, and I'm thinking about, okay, probably they were up against a statutory deadline.
There's no question.
The broader question is like, okay, why are we having this discussion at a point in time in which the only legal thing to do is to approve something? I mean, at that point, it's not a choice. It's not an actual deliberation. It's a formality. And so that's a question I have is like, should the budget approval actually be a formality? Otherwise, what are the commissioners elected for? If they're not there to actually make legitimate decisions, such as prioritizing spending. I mean, the charter is very clear. All the power in the city rests with the city commission. I mean, they actually do have the authority to, throw a budget back. But the problem is they only got it in time where you can't throw it back. I mean, was that planned?
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it seems like a great way. If I want you to approve of my idea, and I'm like, well, you have to do something, and it's due tomorrow. what else can you do?
It doesn't leave you much choice. But regardless, if it passes or not, it's a great discussion to have, so people can understand what we're spending money on, and let them decide instead of just rubber stamping it, no dialogue, and everybody's in the dark.
This goes to longstanding concerns for transparency, where Victoria, once again, keep in mind, she was shot down by the mayor specifically when she tried to do something as simple as opening comments on social media. All hell would broke loose. We wouldn't be able to function as a city. It would be doom and gloom. None of that, of course, has been the case. Tell me about all the conflicts that have been started online since we've been able to come.
It's actually calmed down.
Right, because people are allowed to speak.
Right. I mean, isn't that crazy? Seriously, the temperature has definitely come down in the city.
Because you're not trying to suppress free speech.
And you're not just battling.
It's amazing how that happens. People almost get angry when you tell them they can't exercise their free speech.
Right. Or they're crazy for wanting to know more and wanting to talk about it.
So it sounds like this did nothing to make Victoria feel better about the city's spending patterns.
No, but she did learn that she could bring this up in the future, a specific item, and have that discussion and have it pulled back at a future meeting. And they said,
so they can unapprove certain things.
Yes, the budget is approved, and that's the max. And then if there's certain line items in there that she objects to, she can bring it back up, and if she gets the vote, they can pull that.
That's the power of the purse. I mean,
and hopefully that'll be something that she pursues and doesn't just forget about it.
I want to see her. I think she posted something on Facebook maybe the day before were some specific things. I didn't read it in its entirety, but it seemed like she definitely had specific spending items that she was concerned about.
And they're all valid, in terms of could it benefit us to have new police cars and new 4 ATVs for Parks and Rec and a new lacrosse wall? Now, I mean, I'm sure everybody can make a case for some of these things.
You can always make a case for why everything's good.
Right.
But there's also the question of, do we have the money for it? And should it be the priority? And the question is never, is this a good thing? Because unless you're really coming up with some harebrained ideas, you can make a case. Yeah, it's always a good thing. But do we actually? It should be the priority, and that's what the commission ultimately has to decide. So here's a little bit of trivia.
Mm-hmm.
The budget was $79 million, and just for historical context, I went back and looked at the budgets for 2018 and 2020, so like 5 to 7 years ago. Let's over under. Was the budget back during that 5 to 7 years ago over or under $47 million?
I'm going to say under.
You're exactly right. Well, in 2018 and 2020, it was kind of a trick question. You would have been right either way, because in 2018 it was 44, and in 2020 it was 50. So it was over and under based on which year you picked there. So context. This is 5 to 7 years ago. We were operating $44 to $50 million, and so that was the end of Charles Lacey's tenure. Right. So McCann comes in 2021, and what happens? We go from like 44 to 50 million. Now we're at 79 million. I mean, there is not even, and I can't ever remember this. Victoria's questions, that would be the first time I ever remember any commissioner even asking a question about a specific spending item in that way of people ask about this, but not in the challenging, should we be spending on this right now? Challenging a decision to spend. I could be wrong. Maybe I've missed something along the way, because I haven't actually watched every single commission meeting over the past 5 to 7 years. Watched a lot of them. But this is really, I think, the first time that somebody actually went hard after, should we be spending here? And that,
I thought that was the purpose of the meeting. I thought when you go through the budget in the sunshine, not in a director's meeting behind closed doors, but in the sunshine, if you had any questions, we would ask, or she would ask, and the staff would answer so everybody could see the answers.
But it's precisely because nobody's been doing that our budget has increased by 60 to 80%. I mean, that's astronomical. If you just look at cost of living expenses, we should be, if the budget had increased right about the pace of economic growth and CPI and cost of living indexes and everything, that puts us at about $62 million. Is where, if the budget had increased parallel to the economic growth. So there's going to be increase. Nobody's arguing that we should still be at $44 million that we were at in 2018. We're just thinking okay, what would it have looked like if this had been managed better, if there had been people along the way doing exactly what Victoria was doing last night? I mean, think about that. So, instead of 79 million, now we're at 62 million. Do you know what the savings of the residents would be if our budget was $62 million? It'd be $1,500 a year that the taxpayers would be paying less in taxes. So for the residents, one question we have, that's over $100 a month. What would you do if the city gave you $100 every month? How would you spend it? I mean, that's money you don't have. You put that in a retirement account, and after 20 years, you have probably $50,000 that you can give your kids.
Well, that's on top of everything else that's going on.
Right.
If you live in Tuscawilla, the TLBD is going up. If your water bills are going up, everything's going up. So I thought it was a healthy discussion. They didn't see it that way. They thought, just vote. Why are you doing this? You're making things difficult. This is supposed to be a quick and easy meeting. And that was the impression I got. And I was disappointed because I wanted to hear the justification. And,
right.
talk to me. I'd love to hear that, because if it's justified, we got to do what we got to do, but we should at least have the conversation.
Well, look, I mean, if that kind of
and I don't get to be in those directors' meetings,
right,
so I don't. This is the only chance we really get to have, hear it.
But that kind of transfer of wealth from us to a city where it is frittered away only happens because people not only are they not asking the questions, but they shoot down the people who are, and that's how you end up with a 60 to 80% explosion of the budget over 5 to 7 years. I mean, it's absolutely insane. We should be paying about $1,500 less in taxes, and this is what governments do. They say, well, we're not raising taxes. Every year we hear, well, we're not adjusting the millage rate, therefore we're not increasing our spending. Well, if you haven't adjusted the millage every year, and if the implication is that you're not increasing spending every year, well, how do we go from 44 to 79? Obviously, taxes have been increased. It's because it's based on the formula with the millage, and then the rates go up, so you end up taking more money, even though you're saying you're not taking more money. I mean, it's this, only in government world could you end up in a place where somehow we don't raise taxes, but somehow we've increased our budget by 60 to 80%. How did that happen? It happened by shooting the messengers who are saying, hey guys, how about no? How about we say not yet? So this kind of
priorities.
Here's a question for you. So I pulled some numbers. So there's a group called the Council for Community and Economic Research. So this is one of these national groups that takes like millions of data points on the economy every year. They've been doing it for since 1969, and they're like what the economists look at them and their cost of living index. So they put out these numbers and they evaluate cost of groceries, cost of gas, cost of housing, transportation, healthcare, and they do like an index of how expensive it is to live in every state regionally. And so back in 2023, the cost of living was, the index for Florida was 102.3. So what do you think happened between 23 and 24? Did the cost of living index go up or down, and by how much?
I'm going to say it went up.
It went up. By how much?
Slightly.
Yeah, 0.5%. So between 23 and 24, it went up from 102.3 to 102.8. So just a marginal increase, evaluating the whole economy, how expensive is it to live in Florida? And so what about the first quarter of 2025? It was at 102.8. Did it go up or down, and by how much?
Oh, it went up slightly again.
It went down.
Went down.
Yeah, it actually went back down to 102.2.
Wow.
And so from 2023, it was 102.3, went up a little bit, back down to 102.2. So we're basically flatlining in terms of how expensive it is to live in Florida specifically. And yet our budget's gone up. I mean, it was a 13% increase this year alone between what they just approved for, assuming no cuts were made to it, it was still $79 million. Sounds like that's a 13% increase on a flatlined economy. So this whole idea that, well, everything's more expensive these days. Well, not since 2023, it's not. Everything's flatlined. Why are we going like this on our budget and we're going like this on the economy? I mean, a perfect example is transitioning to the Tuscawilla Tax, right? So we fought that. They were going to double the Tuscawilla Tax, because, again, that whole argument, everything's going up, it's getting more expensive. And then what do we find out 4 days before that vote happened, passed that Thursday? Found out Duke Energy's cutting their rates. I think it's like between 9 and 15% for commercial residents. So I did the math on that. Not most, but a big part of what the Tuscawilla Lighting Beautification District pays for is the power for all the streetlights. Right? I think it's like one number I have in my mind is like $243,000, and I forget. Don't yell at me if I got that number wrong, but I did the math. The savings would have been between like $20,000 and $30,000 a year if Duke follows through with their promises to cut their rates. None of that was considered in the study that was done, because what they had was an ever increasing cost, not a decreasing cost. So you have these factors which are making it actually at times cost going down, and yet we want to double it. It was absolutely insane, that push was being made completely irregardless of the actual forces in the economy. For those of you who don't know, we beat the Tuscawilla tax doubling. It was raised a little bit, for 1 year. Maybe some adjustments were necessary. I don't know. It hadn't been raised. The cap hadn't been raised in a while, but the fees had been raised a couple of years ago by about $8.
But there's a thing about raising, but it's also managing what you're getting.
Right.
And if you're not managing what you're getting very well, but then you're asking for more money, it kind of doesn't sit well. And I think that's the big thing. I mean, I've lived here for a number of years now, and I haven't seen any improvement in anything. But now we're supposed to be told that if you do this, if you raise the taxes, $1 million over the course of however many years, then we'll be able to get it back to where it once was. But it's like, but you haven't done that the whole time I've lived here. But now all of a sudden
the whole idea of getting it back. Let me read. This is the notice that went out for the tax increase, and it gave the amount that it was going to go to, and it said the total assessment revenue to be collected is estimated to be $1.1 million for fiscal year October 1, 2025 through September 30, 2026, and in future fiscal years. So they're basically saying, this is it. We need this for future, there's no sense of for this year alone. No, this is the new normal. Future fiscal years are going to take this same amount to operate. So there was, not only are we speculating that they weren't going to they actually said in the notice that this is not just for next year. This is future years as well. That whole thing. I mean, the residents showed up and spoke at that meeting. I've never quite been to a meeting like that where there was such a concerted, consistent voice for people finally having had enough. And I think if it had to happen on the heels of everything else, with the trash rates that have been going up, the water rates going up, I just get a feeling it really wasn't about that only. It was that on top of everything else.
No question. I mean, it's not just a little here, a little there. It's the how much can you squeeze from us?
Right.
I mean, it's at one time, but that's all. The other thing is, I saw such a disconnect between some people were throw more money at it, and other people were fill in the pond or the fountains and make it just a mound with some landscape. I mean, there was
for the
TLBD. It's let's just go to native Florida with minimal management, and other people were no, we want to look like the best city in America. So there's so much varying ideas of how it should be done.
Well, that's the idea of conversations,
yep.
Right? We get together, we have this conversation. So explain to the viewers, because a lot of acronyms being thrown out. So you have TLBD, you have THOA. What are those two things, and how are they different?
Well, that's something I had to learn moving here. Because I live here in Tuscawilla and in the reserve, and there's the THOA, which I thought was the HOA, but it's not the HOA. It's a voluntary homeowners association. It's not a homeowners association because it can't technically be a homeowners association, although they call themselves that. But it's voluntary. We give them $40 a year. We get a magazine. I think you've got a copy of it there. You get a copy in your mailbox. And we pay it because we wanted to be part of the group and kind of understand what was going on. And then you got the TLBD, which is a special tax that the city set up for the residents of Tuscawilla because they asked for help at some point in the past.
And the residents voluntarily opted into that.
Yes, they asked for it. They desperately wanted it. They wanted to maintain the look that the developer created, despite there not being a single body responsible for all of it. So the city was the natural fit to do that. although it's a unique arrangement. And then you have the THOA, which people assume is that body, which they have nothing to do with it, right? So that's what I thought. I thought the THOA would oversee that. That's not. They're totally separate. Although you're kind of led to believe that in some regard. And THOA was actually a big advocate for the increase. And and so then I attended my first THOA meeting last week, and you learn quickly, because it was a budget meeting, that THOA is not doing well financially. I think they've lost money 3 years in a row. I think they lost $16,000 last year. So what are they doing if they're losing money and we don't see any noticeable improvements? They're definitely not doing more social events. They're putting out a magazine which costs them about $4,000 a month to mail. And what I thought was interesting is they say they're not a political organization, which could be debated whether they are or not, although they have said that they were instrumental in picking a lot of our political leaders in the past. So they've got a lot of influence, or at least they did. But if you look at their postage, it's the same spend every month until you get to the election season, and that postage spend doubles. So it's almost like they're sending it to some houses throughout the year, and then come election time, they're spending a lot more money to get the word out. Why? Because they want to impact the election, and why wouldn't you? But at least say you're trying to.
But they also have political candidates that are buying ads in the magazine too. So I'm sure the income probably goes up for them during that season.
So you send it to more houses, 1 month out of 12, and maybe. And how much are those ads really doing? I mean, the magazine's losing money. They're only promoting it to have influence on the election, in my opinion. It's a voluntary deal. I don't see really any community events being organized. Like I hear in the past, they used to have different family events that really brought the community together, which I think they're down to one a year.
They do one at Trotwood, I think.
They do one a year at Trotwood, and they do a little bit, I think, with Rotary for a donation or something. But great opportunity to be a true voice for the community. But I think it's kind of lost its way, and it's certainly not solvent. So they've got to redo the model. I suggested at the meeting that they fold the magazine because it's losing money, and turn it digital, because they could get a lot more reach and a lot more. They could communicate a lot more.
You get a big retail $4,000 a month on digigital. I mean, if that's how you want to spend
it. They could get not only more reach, but they could get more frequency.
How did people respond when you told them to shut down the magazine? I didn't know that.
I did. I told them this might be my recommendation, being a new voice in this meeting, looking at the numbers and looking at the market and how people are consuming information. It probably would be a smart move to do that. Obviously, they didn't really have an appetite for that, and their defense was a lot of their readers don't have email or internet or get on Facebook. And so I told them I disagreed with that, and I actually went home and looked at the analytics for some of our pages. I love Oviedo Winter Springs, our email list. And I looked at some of the demographics, and would you know that one of the highest and most engaged group of people is the 65 and older crowd. It's the complete opposite of what they assume.
Although I will say this, don't give them necessarily all of your trade secrets here. I mean, it sounds like you.
I think it's not my trade secret. I think it's the worry of the world, and I want to help my community, and I want to help them not lose money on postage. If it's not generating a return. So I sent it to the president of the association. I said, here's the data so that you can understand that by leaving the print, you're not going to lose your audience. You just would have to change how you deliver that message. I mean, I look at that magazine. There's probably 30 Facebook posts, in each magazine that could reach a bigger group of people if they did that. But that would change their whole model, and that would definitely change how they promote candidates come election.
What do you mean when you say that they weaponize it politically? Obviously, they send out more. It sounds like more of a spend during election season.
Well, they double the number of people they send it to.
But is there? Because I've noticed some things in the content as well. Like, I mean, so much of it's like just great stuff, and then you'll get these gems. So I'll give you an example. So first of all, let's start with the fact that the editor is the mayor's wife. So, and this is not the first time. So back when Ted Johnson was a commissioner, so I think Ted Johnson at some point was the editor of the magazine. Could be wrong about that. But after he became a commissioner, they made Elaine, nice lady, they made her the editor.
His wife?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry,
Ted's
that's Ted's wife.
Right.
And so the commissioner's wife was the editor, and now the mayor's wife is the editor. And so they're putting out, ahead of the Tuscawilla Tax increase or being doubled, where they're pushing for it to be doubled. Just categorically false statements. It says, this is Mrs. McCann. It says, with fees unchanged since 2007, rising costs have stretched the budget thin. That's just a categorically false statement. The fees went up within the last couple of years from $120 to $128. And then that same sentiment was echoed, and so they also did another time in that same edition. There was the editorial piece where they came out with the position of the board in favor of the increase. And again, they reiterate the same thing. It says, at present, most single-family homes in Tuscawilla pay $128 per year through the property tax bill for these services. The amount has not changed since 2007. I mean, anybody who just went back and looked at the current budget that they just approved, it shows within the last year it went from it's 2 years ago, it went from $120 to $120. So I don't know if they don't know how to read a budget or not, but there's just a very consistent misinformation. Little things like that, where you try to just throw it in there and hoping that nobody catches it.
And then people think it's an HOA, so they want to really believe it without questioning it, because why would their HOA, so it's interesting.
Here's one of my favorite lines of this op-ed that they wrote. They said, but at its heart, this is about choice. Do we keep Tuscawilla one of the premier communities in Seminole County, or do we accept a scaled-back approach? All right, so they're framing this as, if we don't increase, double this, then it goes to
lose our property.
Right, exactly. They said, one option could be to remove all the plantings and proceed with grass-only medians. Who suggested that? They're saying, well, if you don't raise the tax, well, maybe we could, just all grass on the medians.
Yes, fill in the fountains and with dirt and.
Of course, their next line was, while this might temporarily reduce costs, even the removal process carries significant expense. So they basically shot down their own idea and showed how it was not a actually serious idea. But this is what happens when they take another one. Look, I gave this a couple of years ago. I paid the due. I read the magazines, and I at one point was serving on the TLBD before COVID and some professional things with COVID. I was kind of frontlines IT. Was working ungodly hours. Had no time for extracurricular stuff. Plus, I saw that the TLBD. One thing to mention about that is it's largely an advisory committee. You're there to do a few things, but essentially staff comes with the recommendations, and you're essentially kind of rubber stamping the staff, on that. So the only thing I kind of disagree with the way that some people portrayed this, kind of throwing the TLBD folks under the bus a little bit, is they're just doing what the staff is recommending that they do. Because staff has all of the data. Staff and we would get these contracts where they would present 3 contracts to the TLBD, and man, if it wasn't so easy to pick out which one that they wanted, look, it was so predictable. You have one contract that's so astronomically expensive that you don't even consider it. You have another contract that is really low, but also very poorly put together, where you start to question whether this group even knows how to use Microsoft Word to put a proposal together. And then you have one that's right there in the middle. Not as expensive as the expensive one, but certainly a better presentation than the cheap one. Which one are we supposed to pick, guys? Everything was, and this is under former city manager, so I'm not saying that the current guy does it the same way, I haven't heard that, so I'm only speaking to past when I was on the board at the time, and that's honestly part of the reason I lost interest in it. It's like, okay, well, look, anybody can sit up here and rubber stamp something.
Well, I mean, if the commission can't even ask questions about the city's budget, how's the TLBB going to ask any questions and get anywhere?
Exactly. So look, the folks on the TLBD, they're doing great work. And I don't have any problems with any of them. I have a problem with how they were politicized by folks who were trying to get a doubling of this tax. Which, by the way, you mentioned that they're not an HOA. So how did we get here with that? Like, they call themselves an HOA, but they're not. I mean, were they I think they were at one point actually an HOA, but maybe so. HOAs lapse after so many years, which may have been what happened. I mean, they're a corporation that calls themselves the Tuscawilla Homeowners Association. A number of years ago, they were gifted land. So the land that the fountains are on, owned by the THOA, maintained by the taxpayers. So, they've got a board.
They have to maintain being an entity because they have property.
Right. No, they're a legitimate, corporation filed under the, state of Florida laws. The thing that makes them not an HOA in the traditional sense is the statute says an HOA is somebody who's able to assess mandatory fees and can take out a lien against somebody's house if they don't pay those fees. Like that is what an HOA is, right? You actually have an ability, to put a lien on somebody's house if they don't pay your fees. The fees are mandatory, which a lot of people didn't know. So we did a survey, and a lot of folks did not know that it was optional. And then a lot of folks also didn't know that they own the private land, that their board is advocating that all the residents pay double the taxes, part of which is maintaining that land. Nobody's saying that the land isn't beautiful, it shouldn't be maintained, but I think when you have the mayor's wife writing the editorials, when you have all of these things that are, it really starts to create a picture of, okay, of course they're going to be in favor of doubling this.
Well, why don't they
maintaining their land.
Why don't they take the $4,000 a month that they're printing the magazine and give the $1,500 or $1,700 a month to the person who wants to maintain the fountains? I mean, if they really wanted to help out the residents, maybe that's what they
look,
did.
you make an argument. It's good advertisement.
It loses money.
Right, it loses money, but it's a loss leader, right? I'm not coming out in defense of the magazine, but it is a nice publication, and it's a loss leader.
I am a digital marketer. Yeah. Magazines are going out of business faster than you can shake a stick, and we're holding on for dear life.
How much money are they losing?
I think 3 years in a row, 9,000 one year, 7, and then 15 or 16 this year.
Okay.
So not a ton of money,
right.
But they're certainly not, they got printing that.
I'm sure they've got reserves.
Not many.
Oh, okay.
There was panic in the room when I was there. They need membership to grow, which they don't have really a mechanism to do that.
Well, then stop advocating that our taxes double. If you want membership to grow,
which I thought was interesting, you're desperate to raise these taxes double. Meanwhile,
maybe there's a reason your membership is shrinking. It's because one of the things they say, and I think it's their website somewhere. I read it. Don't shoot me if I'm wrong, but I think I've read somewhere that part of what they offer, as what they do, is advocacy before the city council and the county. I read that somewhere. That's
one of their benefits.
Right. That's what a benefit. Right. And so, okay, so you're saying that you're going to advocate on behalf of the residents. That's why they pay the dues. And what do? You turn around and what you actually advocate for is doubling their tax.
Top.
And you wonder why people aren't going to pay you to go advocate to double their tax. I mean, shockingly, people are not in favor of that.
Well, some residents that have been here a lot longer than I said, some old timers that I listened to at that meeting said, we want it to be beautiful, but you haven't demonstrated any ability to produce, yet you want more. Right. Show us some, and we'll kind of feed you based on performance. There's no expectation of performance, and I think that's where the disconnect is. It's like, just raise it to $1 million, and we won't have any expectation of performance. I think you got to show the residents something before you ask that. And the magazine. I'm sorry. I'm just not interested in it. I don't think it's a viable a medium, and not in this day and age where people are distracted. I mean, in the old days where you had the nightly news, you had your Sunday paper, you had your magazine,
right.
you sat on your recliner, you had all your magazines, you just went one from one to the other. Today you've got the TV, you got the phone, you got your cell phone, you got your kids.
But doesn't that, with all the preponderance of digital, doesn't it make the printed stand out more?
You would think, but when it's layered with ads and a couple editorial pieces that are slanted, obviously not representative of the group, but of like single voice, you kind of lose interest. I mean, I think the president wrote a story in there I just could not relate to at all, and I think also is that there's a changing demographic of this area. I mean, there's an old school vibe, but there's a lot of new families moving in here, and this is just not how they consume information. This isn't Bryan's thing. This is the way of the world. I mean, and so if you want to be effective, if this is making money, God bless you. Don't stop something that's making money at least. But if it's not, we got to reconsider. And I just think there's other ways to do it, and maybe that's an opportunity for somebody else.
Well, hey, good business opportunity, right? I mean, look, it's
Oviedo Community News is an example of one entity that is seeing that opportunity,
right?
It's kind of sliding in there, and they
not doing the print thing,
doing digital, and not only doing digital, but doing social. They're doing email, and then I even noticed recently they've got these news articles that they share, but you can't really read it until you give them their email. And I thought that was a brilliant move by them, because at least they're getting something for that click, so that they can say we're growing and they're reaching more people. So there is a new way, and there is other forces in the market that are putting pressure on that. And I think
we're one of them. The Winter Springs Community Association. I mean, we have been
which is all digital.
It's entirely digital. Right? We don't even have a bank account because we don't have anything to spend on. And we just do entirely email, Facebook group, website. I'm a web guy, so I can do some things the average person maybe can't. It's my area of expertise, but I can tell you that groups like ours, there's a reason why more people showed up to oppose that, even though the magazine was in favor of it, despite the fact that we have no magazine. So we're proving in meetings like that.
Well, you're able to get the pulse of the community faster than a one-a-month mailer.
Right.
And when you're sitting in a meeting,
send out an email and get a survey.
Yeah, you've got the information in an hour. Right. They're waiting 30 days, and when they get it, it's already outdated.
Right.
So they're believed that the will of the people is this, when actually, if they had their ear to the wall a little closer, which is what digital allows you to do, they would maybe see that what they said about the older demographic not getting the Facebook message or not getting the email blast is not true, actually. It's actually, and I definitely want people to see this, the 65 and older crowd is consuming the most digital. Why? They're retired. They're looking at their grandkids on Facebook. Yeah. They're spending time because they got nothing else to do, and that's how they're consuming it. And it's so this assumption that the only way to reach this demographic is through print is just not true. And I think the times have changed. Times are moving quickly, and this is not just them. And I told them, this is not just you guys. You shouldn't feel like I'm picking on you. This is every business out there is having to go and change their marketing strategy. And they said, "Well, is that what you do?" Kind of trying to say that I'm the guy that's trying to push what I do.
Here's my business card.
I just happen to, but it's kind of the way of the world right now. So it's. I was actually there to maybe even help them in one way. Make that if there was an appetite. And it was funny, after the meeting, half the room was like standoffish.
Right.
The other half wanted to come over and learn a little bit more.
What do you say?
And then a few came up to me in the parking lot and said, thank you for bringing in a different idea. And I think that's key, is that group of people has been that group of people for so long. It looks like we just may have lost a camera. That they're not able to kind of see outside the box of what today's market's generating. Right. And so fresh thought, new ideas, new techniques, I think could benefit everybody. And So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds and what they end up doing.
Tying up a loose end on the THOA discussion. So, part of the misinformation that was out there is about the fund being in a deficit. All of that has been disproven. There's $57,000 in the account projected, and this is based on what the city said and what the chairman of the TLBD advisory committee said. The misnomer about a spend deficit was caused by the fact that in a year prior, there was an insurance payout of $208,000, which they held over to the next year. They didn't spend it that year. The next year, they decided to spend that plus a little bit else extra, about $250,000 to repair the fountains. I believe it was a one-time capital expense. So when you look at that 1 year, it looks like you spent more than you took in. But that's because you spent out of a one-time payout. So you weren't even spending taxpayer dollars predominantly there. It was an insurance payout, built up your reserves, then you spent those reserves. Completely legitimate expense. But I think that's the only way that I could see getting to, at one point I heard like a $300,000 deficit and some crazy numbers being thrown out there. I think it was because of a very simple misread of a financial statement. Once you got into it, again, we did several records. I wanted to make sure that, look, if I'm going to go out there and raise a concern about doubling a tax, that I at least have the facts of what the situation is on the ground, right? Because I'm not going to advocate for something. I mean, look, we got hundreds of pages of records requests over the years. So I don't do anything without painstakingly getting the data. And once I was convinced that, yes, we do have a surplus, $57,000, roughly 10% of the operating cost for the year. Good, healthy, rainy day fund, 10% of your spend is a good number. That's when I thought, all right, there's just no need to do this. I mean, they wanted to do a lot of projects, like rebuilding some of the walls. Like, they're in fine shape. It got to the point where, look, I don't mind having the wish list, like you were saying about the budget more generally. I think these things are fine, but now maybe we raise it a little bit and start to build up that reserves and do it over the next 3 to 5 years that we do these things versus doing everything at once this year and then locking in a higher rate. Even if they had come back and said, we're looking for a 1 year, increase, and then it goes back down just to replenish some reserves, that would have been a different story entirely as well. If they said, let's go up to, 255 for this year and then back down. But it was the locking of it in forever, in perpetuity, everything kind of compounding on top of each other.
There's no accountability at that point. And it's like now they have to come back every year and justify it with performance to get the increase. And that's the way it should be.
Right. So anyway, thank you to the folks who showed up there. I think your voices were heard. We had over 700 people sign a petition. And that was predominantly folks in Tuscawilla. I think I did the math, I'm not going to throw it in. It was a high percentage of the number of households in Tuscawilla had somebody, in their household that signed it. Over 10% of every household in Tuscawilla had somebody that signed it. And it was really, for being something that was so locally focused to our neighborhoods around here, it exploded. And that's the degree of appreciation that people feel for folks who are willing to stand up and say, hey, not against this entirely, but we've got to be responsible. We've got to make sure that we're stewarding this money well. We've got to make sure that we're adding some kind of sanity. It is absolutely insane that your budget would go up 13% 1 year when the economy's flatlined. It's absolutely insane that since Charles Lacey left office, our spending has gone up between 60 and 80%, even though the economy has gone up by 25 to 30%. It is that to me is reckless and irresponsible, and puts us in.
What's funny is that the mayor talks about we're finally not pushing off our responsibilities. We're finally truing up where we need to be. That was kind of this thing, and then there was some public comment in support of the mayor saying you got to trust the city manager, which I do. I think what Kevin Sweet's doing is way an improvement over what we had before, in just providing a little bit more transparency in how this is going down, because I feel there was more cooperation between the city manager and the opposing forces to shut down any more, even though we didn't have a big discussion on the budget, at least it was able to kind of creep in there a little bit, whereas in the former group, it wouldn't even have come up. It would have been in and out in 2 seconds. And
look, a competent city manager, like the one we have, is going to be able to take the directives that he's given and go with them and get the job done. And but it's the commission's responsibility to set that policy, to set those priorities, to ask those questions. Look, a competent city manager, I would say, is probably going to advocate for a little bit more than maybe he needs. But you just accept that. You just accept that it's like you never make your best. The offer you want is never the offer you make at first.
It's kind of like Victoria says, like my kid's Christmas list has all these things on it. They're not getting everything on the Christmas list. It's going to be trimmed down.
So I don't blame the city manager at all for asking for things that are more like that's almost his job. But it's the commission's job to say, all right, we get it, we understand. Let's prioritize these over here. And Victoria trying to do that is apparently a problem, and it should not be a problem.
If there's one thing she was hired to do, I think it was, or voted to do.
Hired is a good word.
Hired to do is to ask those questions. If that's the only thing that she was put there to do, was to ask these questions, and getting the answer is one thing, but asking the question is so important. And I was very proud of her for asking it, because sometimes it's a thankless job, and they bite your head off, and when they team up on you, and you feel like, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? But you got to have courage, and there should never be, when it comes to money, other people's money, there should never be anybody shamed for asking questions. That is to me, it's probably the most important and admirable thing she could do, is really drill in, and she loves it. The big dollars don't scare her. She really wants to understand, and she's not unreasonable. If it's needed, she's all in. She just wants to ask a question, and sometimes it's just in the response that gives the voter the confidence. And I asked the question, you answered me. Now let's move forward with the vote.
Right.
But if I ask the question and you say this is not time to ask the question,
right.
What do you want me to do? Vote?
That almost makes you think that you should ask another question. Like why? What are you implying? Defensiveness always invites a sense of maybe I'm onto something.
Yeah, maybe I'm striking a chord here. What else can we uncover? And,
it sounds like she did the Lord's work there, and I think that if there's specific things that can be rolled back out of this, specific things that can be put off until maybe there's a better economic situation, and we can do things more responsibly. Anybody who's advocating for that has the support of those of us who are living in this tight economy, thinking, how could I spend $1,500 if the city gave it to me this year back? If we'd been responsible under McCann's administration, that's about the savings that we would have on an annual basis if the budget had been stewarded better. And that's the real life consequences of leadership at a city level. Can we get there? Can we get back to where it should be? Maybe not. The choices only get harder. The farther you go, the more you get into it. We are always going to encourage and really support and applaud. It was the word I was looking for. Folks who are willing to stand up for the residents who are having to pay these bills. Because I tell people, my friends who don't live in Winter Springs, how much it costs to live here. I mean, their eyes just start glazing over as they just can't. My sister-in-law told me the other day, she lives right outside of Winter Springs over in Castleberry, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we love it there. it's great because, we get to live right next to Winter Springs, but we don't have to pay, Winter Springs taxes and expenses. So like the joke around town is that you got to live as close as you can to Winter Springs. You get all the perks, but you don't have to have the expenses. I mean, that's the running joke around Seminole County, particularly for some of these unincorporated and other cities around. They love what we offer. They just don't want to have to pay for it. And the joke's on us, for not having more people like Victoria that are willing to ask those questions. So again, she did a great job. This has been a great discussion. I know we've probably gone a little over, but man, once we get going, these are the kinds of issues and kinds of discussions that really do matter for folks in their bottom line, their pocketbook. So thanks again for opening up your studio, and
yeah,
I'll give you the last word.
No, it's just I was very proud of Victoria for just having the dialogue, and I'll continue to support her to do that. The transparency is where it's what she's trying to do. Is try. She's not a professional politician.
Right.
She doesn't know all these little intricacies of what work on that dais is. I mean, she's only been doing it a short time. So don't shame her for being a mom and a business owner who's up there on her her Monday evening trying to ask the questions for the residents that voted her in. That's the only thing. You will get your way or you won't get your way, but let's not shame the person for asking the questions. And so that takes courage because, make it honest, when she gets, pushback, it does affect her. And when she comes home, the air's a little thick for a minute, but it kind of settles down. And, I just wish that dais was a little bit more understanding of her core intentions versus just, this is not the time. This is not the time. Which is how they treat her. But no, it's great. I mean, the more we can have these conversations, the more people, the more voices, the more different varying opinions. It'll enlighten me, enlighten you, enlighten the community as to why things are being done. And that's all I think really people want to know. They just want to be a part of the decisions, understand why the decisions were made. And I think this community is supportive. If it makes sense, we're going to do it. If it doesn't make sense, let's not do it. But if it makes sense, everybody's in. And that's why we're here. And I think if we continue, everything will be fine.
In the words of Charlie Kirk, disagree agreeably. That's all you can ask for. So,
God bless.
Thank you for your time, man. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
You too. Awesome.